Yeah, hi everyone. Now let us look at more on data wrangling. And now we are looking at reshaping data, okay? So as usual, if you go to the R code for this particular lecture 5, you can actually copy the code on reshaping data. And then once you copy the code, you can just put the code in R, and then you can practice along, or you can copy it one after the other and then practice along, whichever way that actually help you to follow along and learn effectively. There are so in the case of reshaping data, so I mean, you can have a very wide data set. You might want to actually compress it to kind of a long data set, maybe for some different type of analysis. So how do you go about it? So in this case, we have this particular data, and there's also part of data wrangling, okay? So in this case, we have this data in which we have created this data frame, which we are calling it student data wide. And then we have the data frame with student ID. We have test 1, test 2, and then test 3, okay? Yeah, so this is a data frame we are creating. So let us run the data. Let us run this data frame, okay? So once we've run it, if we want to actually see the data set, we can actually highlight on this and then run it to see the data set, or you can actually use the print. You can just either even call it, okay, student wide data, and then you can just run it, and then it will print out the data. So this is the data we have. So we have a data of 3 students with 3 different tests, okay, and the score for each of those tests. But now what we actually want to do is we want to actually change this data from being wide to a longer data where you are actually going to have one particular column which is actually giving it the score of all the students. And then we are going to have another column which is actually going to give us the test taken by each of those students, okay? And then we are going to have the student ID also appearing for the 3 different tests in which they've taken, okay? So the one package in which you're actually going to use is called the tidyr package, which you can actually install. If you have it installed, you have to first of all install it by using the install.packages function. Once you have installed, you have to activate or load it. So I have already installed it, so I just load it. So once you have loaded, it allows you to actually write this particular function using, so first of all, we are going to name the new data we are going to create, which is the long data as student data long, okay? And then we are assigning it. So this the information. So we are going into the student data wide. And then, so this actually sign here, which is the percentage greater than percentage sign, allow us to go into this particular data, okay? And then what are we going to do the data with? We are going to use a function which is called the pivot underscore long, okay, which is part of the tidyr package. Now, with this function, we are actually going to create a column. So we say calls equal, then we say stats underscore with what test. So the common, we are actually going to create the column which we are going to call the available name, or which is the common name, is what test, the test name, okay? So we are actually going to have test, and then we are going to create a new name. So name it to test name, okay? And then for each of those tests, we also want the score of each of those tests. So we are also giving it values to. So we are actually values to, and that values to, we are actually giving it what? The score. So at the end of the day, so you name it what? The new test name. And then we are now also the values to, we also create a new column, which is called the score, which is actually going to have each of those scores of those students, okay? So let us run this line of code. You can just put the cursor there and then run. Okay. So once you have run this line of code, we have already run this line. Now, once the line is being run, there's what we have. So you can see we have student ID for. So first of all, if you look at the first one, the white data, we have student 1 for test 1, test 2, test 3. Now in the long data, we have again student ID 1 for test 1, test 2, test 3, which is another test name, and then for the score for each of those tests, then followed by student 2, student 3. Now this allows you to perform some analysis like ANOVA test, right? Where you would want to know whether there's differences between the test based on the test score for each of, for the students, right? Okay. Now, let us also do further another example where we are actually going to make use of a test data, okay? So first of all, let us try to import our test data. So the data in which we are actually going to be able to import is called the myPrac data, okay, which I've made it available to you. So in order to import, let us look at the properties of this data set. So we go to the properties, and then we are going to copy the link of this data set. And then what we are going to do is we are going to actually be able to replace it here. Okay. And then we are going to change all the backslash to /. So again, depending on the computer you are using, maybe you might still have to use the backslash, but most often for Windows, you're actually going to change all the backslash to /. Okay. Okay. So now, which means, so there's the location or the path for which is going into my computer to be able to actually, get hold of this text data, okay? So the function which you are going to actually use is the read.table, which is a function which allows us to actually import test data. So I'm going to call that data set test.file data. Okay, you can call it any whichever way you want. So that is being assigned to the data we want to call. So we are using the read function, and then also we copy the path, put the path here, and then comma header equal true because the data is already having header. Okay, so now let me run this line of the code. So you are going to have some warning sign. Anyway, ignore the warning sign. It doesn't mean there's an error, okay? So if you want to see the names of the data set, you can actually you can use the function names, and then you put in the test.file data, and that allows you to see the name of the column names of the data set. And so now next, we are actually going to make this data. You can see, and then we can also practically just run the data. So we say test.file data, okay? So let's run this data set. Okay, so this is what we have. What do you see? We are seeing that we have ID 1, gender female, race, and then treatment. And then they have the different days in which the treatment was given with a score, right? So they have day 1, day 2, day 3. ID 2, the same thing, ID 3. So the common denominator is what? Day, okay? So what then it means that we're actually going to use the day as a means to pull the data from this particular test file data and make it long, okay? So in this case, again, we create a new data frame, which we are going to call it test.file long. And then we are going to actually go into the test.file data, which is the original data. And by going, we are using the pivot underscore longer. And then what column are we going to create? Column equal start with. So we are looking at column that start with day, okay? Which allow us to pull all those day data set into one column. Then how are we going to give it a name? Name to what? So we are going to give it name to day name. You can give it any name you actually want. And then value to, value underscore to, score, okay? Now let's go ahead and then run this part of the code. Okay, so now we go ahead and then we run it. So here we have it, and then we can print the data. Okay, you can use the print function, or you can just decide to just, call the data itself, the name of the data itself, which is testfile data underscore long. Anyway, let us print it. Once you have printed this, what we have. Okay, so now we are having all the ID for student 1, and of course, student 1, there were 3 days for which the treatment took place. So for that matter, student 1 is female. So with the same race, the same treatment, then, but the treatment took place in day 1, day 2, day 3. Now we have for each of the days, the treatment for ID 1. And then we have ID 2, ID 3. Again, this can also allow us to see whether if there are differences in the treatment score for, the days in which the treatment actually took place, right? All right, so this is how you can easily transform or reshape a particular data, which is actually wide, into a longer data set and use it for some form of analysis. And depending on the statistical tool you actually have. And again, you always need that kind of common denominator, which is available for all the columns, and then you can actually use the tidyr package to be able to transform that data from a wider data to a longer column data. Okay. All right. So I will see you in another